everyone. I'm Alexa Bunting, the marketing coordinator here at Pragmatic Works, and we are starting a new interview question series, kind of to prepare you guys for if you go out into the career world. And today our topic is going to be on the top 10 questions that you may be asked in a Power Apps interview. And today with me, I have Brian Knight, our founder and CEO, also trainer here. And I have Matt Peterson, a senior trainer here at Pragmatic Works.
Thank you. So guys,
are you ready to answer some questions?
Called a classic Stump the Chump session, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are super excited to start this series, and it's going to be super fun. So bear with us, and we've got some good questions today.
Sounds good. Let's do this.
All right,
let's hop into it. All right. So the first one I have for you guys is, where do I store my data in Power Apps?
Well, as in all things consulting, right, it really depends. This decision is really a licensing question. It's a volume side. It's also about security. So it depends on a lot of veil areas there. We'll kind of have some follow-up answers there as well. But starting with if the first option might be Excel. We want to avoid Excel if at all possible, because it will give you some weird error messages sometimes. You might also get like locking issues, and it's kind of restrictive on what you can do. The next option up from a volume side is going to be SharePoint. SharePoint, you generally want to limit yourself to about 20,000 rows. There was a few reasons for that. You can have up to 30 some odd million records in SharePoint, but if you find yourself starting to hit, once you cross that 5,000 row limit, you start to get some volumetric issues around like changing your views and those kind of things. At 20,000 rows, it becomes even more rigid. So there's also some security issues sometimes with SharePoint, where if I want to grant Alexa the rights to a certain a SharePoint list for the app to use, she can go to that SharePoint list directly and edit the data. So that's one of the gotchas around SharePoint there also. Next one, the volume side, is going to be Power Apps for Teams. This is also on the free side if you have a Teams environment. This actually installs a small version of Dataverse, up to 1 million records and 2 gigs in size per team channel. It's a lot more secure, and it's usually a better option than something like SharePoint. And then going up the next piece, now we're hitting the paywall. And that paywall means I now need to go ahead and license Power Apps. That next volume side might be Dataverse. And there's some reasons why we'll use Dataverse. We'll cover those in a moment here. But this allows you to have the 4 terabytes of data in a given environment. And finally, the last option is going to be SQL Server. The pro of SQL Server is cheap to basically license in the cloud. The con is you now need a database developer to manage it, to edit it, to create your schema. Dataverse, anybody can then do that also. So those are the pros and cons of each of those platforms.
Awesome. Are we ready for the next question?
I think so. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
All right. And for those of you just joining us, we are starting a new series about the top interview questions. And today is about Power Apps. So we're just going through some questions right now. And if any of you all have any comments or any additional questions, feel free to comment while we're doing this. We'd be happy to answer.
Sounds good.
All right. Next question. How does where I store my data impact what type of app I choose?
Yeah, great question, Alexa. So as Brian mentioned, we have lots of different options for the data sources we choose. Some have their pros in terms of like speed, creating the databases, and some have cons with them because they might cost a little bit of money when we get to that paywall. So for example, if we have data like in SharePoint, well, the application that we can make off of that is a Canvas application. Your Canvas applications are the ones that look really pretty. It's probably what most people think of when they hear the word app. They think of something on their phone or on a tablet. And so for Canvas applications, you have really unlimited data sources that you can choose from, all of the data source connectors within Power Apps. But there's a caveat to that. Some of those connectors are what are referred to as premium connectors. And if it's a premium connector like SQL Server, as Brian mentioned a little while ago, then you're going to have an upgraded license, not just your typical Office 365 license, to create the app with that connection. Now, those are Canvas apps. Our other kind of apps that we have in Power Apps are model-driven applications and portal applications. And the caveat with a model-driven or portal application is that you have to use Dataverse. So the data requirement there is it has to be Dataverse. Now, Dataverse can be used in a Canvas app, but for model-driven applications or portal applications, you are locked down to using your Dataverse, which again has that little bit of an extra fee to it, depending upon what licensing you have. So that's really kind of the drawback, or not the drawback, the things you have to consider. And each application looks different. And I think we might even show a few Canvas apps and model-driven applications. You've never heard of them to get an idea. Brian, is there anything else that you would add to that? Like if you were in an interview?
Now you nailed it, man. Why don't you hire you?
Hey, that's a great idea.
Yeah, you should make him a trainer or something.
Go figure.
All right, guys, you ready to move on to the next question?
Let's try it.
All right. What type of other decisions go into what type of app I build?
Well, this is also trying to piggyback what Matt was saying. This comes down to who is your audience. If your audience is going to be an external person outside of your organization, you might want to look at using Dataverse and Power Pages, which is previously called Power Apps portals. This allows people outside of your organization, anonymous people, or if you have, I have 100,000 employees, but only a couple hundred of them need to access the application every single month, then a Power Page might make sense. For a back office type application where you're trying to enforce some type of business process, using model-driven apps might make a lot of sense. If your users love them some Excel, model-driven apps make a lot of sense also. They can export and import to Excel with just a few clicks. It also handles things like row-level security very easily, where Alexa can only see her own data, or Alexa and her boss can see data inside the marketing department. Canvas is a good catch-all. Most people are going to prefer Canvas because it's basically a blank canvas, and they can do whatever they want to with that blank canvas. So those are kind of the vagaries that you might have inside the gray areas.
All right, next question. And thank you everyone for joining us. There's a couple more people hopping on. So we are doing interview questions, top 10 for Power Apps that you might get asked. All right, next question is, I'm getting the wrong answer. When I search my SharePoint list, it's missing rows. What could cause that?
What could cause that? A bad Power App developer? No, that is not it. What is causing this is something referred to as a delegation warning. And it's a big gotcha when it comes to SharePoint especially. So just an overview of what a delegation warning is. Technically, when we write Power Apps languages, we write functions for the Power App to do, the Power App program doesn't do the work. It actually sends the work to your data source and then retrieves those results, whether we're searching over records, we're updating records, etc. Well, sometimes the data source doesn't understand the language being sent to it to ask that question, and it goes, hey, I don't know what to do. So here's all the data, you take it, import it into the app, and then Power Apps, you do all of the work. But there's a limit to that. So for example, let me show you an exact concrete example of this. So this is an app. I currently have the ability to search for a patient. So if I come over here and I search for Jack, boom, Jack shows up. If I just put in the letter E, great, anybody with the letter E is now showing up. Fun, fantastic, right? Well, a little bit of a problem. Over here, when I wrote this function, which I'll show in a second, I'm getting this caution sign. This is delegation warning. And what it's telling me is saying, hey, you've told me to do a search. Your data source doesn't know how to do that. Therefore, this might not work correctly on large data sets. Well, large, that's kind of ambiguous there. Like, what is large? Well, let me show this. And first, this is just the generic code for searching for these patients. But if I go to my file ribbon and I go to settings and I come all the way down to data row limit, this is saying how many rows it will do the work on if the data source can't do it. So if we can't delegate the work and Power Apps has to do it, it says, I'm only going to do this on the first 500. So what's the maximum you can bring it up to? You can bring it all the way up to 2,000, but that is the limit. So if you know you're never going over 2,000 records, the search, you're good to go. But what if you're going to go over that? So let's say I'm going to make this really obvious. I'm going to put it at 1 here. So it's only going to work on 1 record. So when I close out of here and I go to play, I'm going to search for Jack Peterson. And as I search, doesn't show up, even though we know he's here, because I said only bring one record in to do the search over. So if I look for Tyler, now I'm good. And now notice, because I've already used search now, the other records aren't going to show up ever again here. So the way we would fix this with SharePoint, and there's lots of other kinds of delegation warnings, but just to like, hey, how do I fix that? The way I would fix this is I would use this function down here. This is going to do a filter statement, and it's going to check the starting characters of that column. So it's not as good as search, so I'm going to get rid of this up here at the top, and we'll run the filter. So, and let me come back here. Starts with text. Oh, it's not text input 1 anymore. It is input search patient dot text. Let me wrap that. So now when I hit play here, if I put in, now all my records are showing. Now I can search. But the drawback is if I search for S, it's only looking for the first character of S. But it will always give me all of my records. And that would be kind of one of the best fixes there for it. So delegation is a big gotcha. Repeat after me, SharePoint is not a database. SharePoint is not a database. That's why SharePoint has the most delegation warnings.
Well, and things like you mentioned search, Matt, that's the most common one we see. There are some ways around it. Matt showed one of the ways around it. There are other ways you can kind of hide galleries and make that work. But it also impacts things like counting of data, where if I had 10,000 patients in that list that Matt was just showing, and I search for Jack, it's only going to search those first 2,000 patients before it gives up on the answer. So absolutely. All right, Alexa, I feel another chump question coming.
All right, let's see here. We've got a, what else can I do with my apps?
Well, when we thought of this question, we ask a lot of our future people with this question also. What we really mean by that is there's a lot of things, extra stuff you can do in your app. These 780 some odd connectors at the time of this recording also include things like texting of people. If you want to go ahead and text that nurse or the doctor that, hey, I need an escalation. We can also integrate a Power BI report right inside my app. We can integrate Power Automate inside my app, or even things like chatbots as well. In reverse of that, we can also put inside the Power BI report an app. So if you wanted to have a data entry point for your Power BI report, you can absolutely do that also. So quick answer, but you can do it pretty much anything your imagination entails.
Yeah.
Last thing also there is AI Builder. AI Builder will let you scrub the data out of a PDF or out of an image or a handwritten receipt, and it will pull that data out so you don't have to transcribe that data.
All right. All right, next question, guys. Let's see here. What type of coding does one use in Power Apps?
Great question. So the coding that we use, the official name is called the Power Apps FX language. And the good news is anyone who has a little bit of Excel knowledge, you'll see that there are some commonalities to learning this language. Microsoft's main goal was to make a low code to no code project or program. And they had success with Power BI where they used a formula language called DAX. And they said, well, when we make Power Apps, let's tap into all pre-existing knowledge people have to make it easier to learn. So as you start to learn this language, it is I think one of the easier languages to learn. We have a cheat sheet on our website. So you go to our website and you go to resources, cheat sheets. One is Power Apps, where Brian and I have curated a list of all the most common formulas that are used in just about every app. Either Brian or I create, or we help someone else troubleshoot or fix, because that's the other thing our company does is we do hackathons and we do virtual mentoring. And we said, look, let's get all these formulas people use all the time. Let's curate them and have those for everyone else. And so some gotchas that you'll know with the FX language is it's case sensitive. So you never really want to type in the whole formula. You use the IntelliSense to pick and choose the functions you want. And that way you can avoid any of those typos and then pulling your hair out going, why isn't the formula working? A lot of times it's because you used an uppercase instead of a lowercase. So with the Power Apps FX language, it's very robust, tons of functions out there, but we've curated a list of the most top ones to take a look at. So that's the type of coding we use.
Awesome.
Also, one more type, just to add a little bit to that also, inside of things like model-driven apps, you might also integrate with things like some .NET code or JavaScript. If you so chose, they're bringing PowerFX in that area also. Additionally, if you go into things like the Power Apps portals, now called Power Pages, you get languages like Liquid, which is a Shopify language, open source, and JavaScript over there also. So there's a few other languages that are more minor players in the Power Apps world also. Alexa?
All right, so we've got another question, and this one we actually had someone comment something related to it as well. So if you guys want to answer that after this question, it's kind of related to this. What is Dataverse? You might answer his question in the in your answer. So let's see.
Sounds good. This is a question from Monty, looks like here.
Yes.
So Monty, if you're with us, I hope you're with us still. We'll answer that question as well. So what is Dataverse? Well, Dataverse, what Microsoft's goal with Dataverse was to democratize the ability for users to basically build out their own database. Traditionally, if you want to build a database out, you have to go through and build out all these tables, build out all on SQL Server potentially. Dataverse is a SQL Server database behind the scenes. But with that SQL Server database, you also can basically construct this in a web page. So you don't have to know how to build a schema and how to code and all that. So whether you're a project manager or a developer, it's super, super simple. Now, it also gives you a lot of plumbing built into this also. And I'll go ahead and share my screen here so you can kind of see a few examples of this. So as far as the plumbing goes, if I were to go over to Dataverse here, and I should never create my tables this way, I should always use a solution, but I'm just going to show you an example of a quick table here to kind of play with. It has plumbing like, if I look at achievement, for example, most of the columns you're about to see are system columns that were invented by Microsoft. So things, if I zoom in a little closer, who created the record, when was it created, who last modified it, who's the owner of the record, all the stuff you're seeing here was built by Microsoft. It also has things like row-level security, and additionally, it has things like business unit level security and hierarchy security, where all of that is built in right out of the box. Now, we had a great question here from Manny. Sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And this question was around Dataverse. How does it save files? Well, there's a number of options we can do here. If I were to go back to my table and go to properties, again, I should never do this in the Dataverse tab, always do this in solutions, but you'll see that I can enable attachments right here for things like notes, CAD drawings, project documents, and those kind of things. Additionally, Monty, and this actually goes over to, they store it outside of here in Azure. You have things like Azure Blob Storage, data lakes, and all those things that are there for your unstructured data. As I scroll down, you can also do things like creating a new activity for logging things like phone calls and appointments and all those kind of things. And then lastly, on the right, Manny, you can also store documents inside of SharePoint if you wanted to. So imagine you have an application for a scholarship. And inside that scholarship application, it will create, every time you get a new application, a new record, a new folder inside of your SharePoint list. And in that folder, it's all the goodies from that you may have about that application for a scholarship. So those are some of the cool things you can do. Now, how it looks on a model-driven app is like this. This is a really simple one here, but you'll see a little plus button over here, and I can go through and attach. These are all activities. Checking that box here, and this is the enable attachments button there. So this will store it inside of Dataverse and the file storage for Dataverse. So hopefully that answers your question, Manny, as well as a few other ones there as well. Back to you, Alexa.
All right, and just as a reminder, if anyone else has some questions, feel free to ask. We're getting a little bit more, so if anyone else has questions, just add them in there, and we'll try to answer as best as we can. All right, our next question here. What are a few of ways to send data to a data source?
Great question. So, for example, like in a Canvas app, one of the most typical ways people start with sending data to the data source is by using forms. We put a form into our Power application. We then, in that form, hook it to our data source. We bring in what fields we want to either write to or that we want to edit for pre-existing records. And what's beautiful about it is all we have to do is on some kind of button or an image or anything that has what's called an onSelect property, we write a function called submit form. And then whenever that thing is clicked, whatever we chose, it does submit form. It takes all of the fields that we put into the form and submits it to the data source. So you might say, that sounds easy. Why doesn't everyone just use that method? Well, with the form, it is a little bit more rigid in design. You can modify. But if you want picture pixel perfect application, and you want maybe the employee name input to be in the upper left-hand corner, and you want the date to be in the bottom right, don't know why you would want that, but if you wanted that, now these controls are no longer inside of a form, so we can't use a function called submit form. But what we can do instead is we run a function called patch. What patch can do is it can create a new record within a data source. The only not difficulty, the only thing with patch is it's a little bit more of a complex function. So we say patch, we say what data source we're going to, then we give it the function called defaults to create a new record. Then in a set of curly braces, we put in the name of the column, and then we represent what control is going to give the data to that column. And so we reference all these controls on the application screen. So you get more design experience, but harder a little bit to write the code, but not super difficult. We have that on our cheat sheet as well, I believe. And the other thing that patch can do, so I said patch is used to create new records. It can also just do an update of a record. So when you click a button, it takes this record and changes a specific value in a column to whatever you choose for that to be. So instead of editing the whole record, we're like, nope, whenever I click that, it turns the record from active to inactive. So those are the kind of things of patch and submit forms are the way we go with that.
And Matt, where I typically use that myself is inside of a gallery. If I want to make that gallery editable, then I'll typically, or have an icon that sets a status to something, then patch makes a lot of sense, where they only know they're submitting a form. For example, a gallery, you might have a gallery that says, patient name. I hit a little pencil next to that, it turns editable. I type in the new patient name, hit save, and it does a patch. Because we're outside the form, patch has to be the answer, or update if, or one of those kind of things you have to do.
Yep, and stay tuned to our YouTube channel, because in the next 3 weeks, I have another patch video coming out if you're interested in it.
Shameless plug. Those videos are great. Everyone should check them out. I'm learning some new things from them too.
Awesome.
All right, so our next question here, what are some of the best practices for end user experience for an app?
Well, Matt, do you want to tag team this one? I'll go ahead and share my screen in a moment here. Let me go ahead and add mine to the screen. There we go. Now, it depends. It's a lot of personal preferences and those kind of things around that. One of the things you can do is you can download something from Microsoft called the Creator Kit. I will go ahead and put that link in the description of this video after we're done today with this and it publishes. But the Creator Kit allows you to do things like some best practices around using a fluid design, as well as some other little gotchas it can do as well. Matt, one of the things I like to do at least is, as I'm looking at a Canvas app like this one, this is a really long form. It may have been over n number of pages here. And I wanted to kind of chop it up to where our users can't see all the data at one time and get overwhelmed. So this is actually a series of forms here that all get submitted at the very end. And also, as I play this and I select something, you'll notice my progress indicator down the bottom kind of moves forward also. So it makes things a lot easier. That's one of my things I like to do also. One of the things that Matt and I both like is around theming. Now, Microsoft has that Creator Kit, which will allow you to do theming. But additionally, if we wanted to here, we can also build our own theme. You'll notice in the home ribbon under themes that you can't build your own theme here. So what I'm going to do is I kind of built my own set of variables here where I can build my own theme. And then with that, I assign these variables to things like my header menu, my backgrounds, and all those kind of things. So it makes it where it's a little more manageable to make your own theme as part of that. Matt, what kind of some style guides would you typically do here also?
Yeah, well, Brian knows I'm the worst when it comes to styling, but I'm getting better and better. But in terms of the styling, I'm going to take this a little bit different, Brian, in terms of our users using the app. So let me add mine to the stream here. So a lot of times when you have forms, one of the great things about Power Apps is its goal is to help get rid of data entry errors and wrong data. So sometimes when we do an application, for example, this well check date here, if I want to make sure that when the user's creating a record and there's a value that has to be there, and I don't want them to screw that up, what we can do in forms, and you can do this with any input control, is you can change default values. So you can see I changed the default date to today. So right when they get here, one, user-friendly, they don't have to pick the date, it's going to execute to today. And then the second thing I can go further with it is if I know that my user's creating it, I don't want them to backdate anything or to future date anything. on this form here, I can go to its display mode, and I can change it to one called like display mode. Let me spell this correctly, .disable. And when I do that, now the user sees what's being collected, but they cannot change it. And then other things for your forms is you might want to collect data values, but you don't even care that the user sees it, but it has to be part of record creation. So you put this default value in, and then once you have it set up the way that you want, you can go to your properties panel on the right-hand side, and we can turn the visibility from on to off. Let me make sure I have the whole thing selected. So visible from on to off. So it's still being collected, but your user no longer sees it. So those are a few things that I like to put into mine to make sure that data is being collected. You also can go even further with it to where they can't even hit a button, like the submit button, until one of your text fields has a value in it. So you're saying, even though it's not required in the data source, I'm going to make it required in my app. So I'm going to tell my app to check that control and see if that control is blank. If it's blank, then I don't let them hit the button. If there's values in it, then the button lights up and they can hit it. So those are the 2 to 3 most common ones I use to make it user-friendly as well as data entry-friendly.
Awesome. So it sounds like, Matt, the big theme for you is just making it where it's less friction for the end users.
Yep, for sure. Because if you make an app that's hard for a user to create, no matter how pretty it looks, and even if it does its job, if it's hard for the user to use it, they typically abandon that.
Awesome. All right, then we're down to our final question, aren't we, Alexa?
Yes. The final question. All right, everyone. And we'll try to get those questions answered that you guys have in the comments as well. But this is our final one we have today. What are some common user interface best practices?
All right, I guess I'll start here on this one, Matt, and feel free to add anything you wish as well. I kind of stole my own thunder on the last question here, unfortunately, but that's fine. So looking at this application you saw here, there's 2 things I want to make sure I bring your attention to. One is the Creator Kit. The Creator Kit I put in the chat window right now. This allows you to take some shortcuts in applications. So if I once you click on that link, it will take you to download and install a solution. You'll install the solution right inside the environment that you wish. I've got my solution already installed. I thought I did, at least. I do not. Here we go. Let me go back one level, go to Solutions, and there it is, Creator Kit. This Creator Kit is by Microsoft's CAT team, the Customer Advisory Team. It comes in a managed flavor and an unmanaged flavor of the code, and it gives you a whole slew of apps, fluid designs, and templates to kind of make your life a little bit easier. So for example, if I want to kind of experiment some of the fluid designer here, I can go ahead and play this guy right here, and you'll see a lot of the kind of common things. So for example, if I want to build a new theme, my color code is, watch my colors on the right as I do this, are going to be more of a red color. It's my red buttons now. My text color will be more, kind of grayish. But look what's happening at the bottom as I do this. Right here, it's also doing an accessibility check. It says that people that are vision impaired, including myself with my glasses off right now, are going to have some issues with this color choice here. So as I make it more and more stark, you'll see that it eventually lights up. See, whoa, there you go. Now I turn green all of a sudden. There's enough contrast between my primary and my text color now to where it works. Additionally, as you do this, it gives you a whole bunch of extra goodies and code. I can hit export theme out. There's my code to bring in the app on start with all the color codes I need to make this work. There's also something called the Center of Excellence Toolkit, and it has a design template builder as well. That one gives you additional things you can play with as well. Things like building the perfect theme for phone apps and tablet apps, and it gives you a starting point for this. There's loads more inside this Creator Kit. There's a whole reference app you can kind of play with and consume. This is going to have a whole bunch of the fluid design pieces here. Like, all right, I want to do a tagging system, for example, or a progress indicator. So if I go over to tagging here, there's my menu structure here. So this actually gives me like little breadcrumbs up top. And then it shows me the code. By hitting the code button, it will show me the code I need to make that work. So there's and you can actually edit this app and see the best practices. There's some do's and don'ts, and it talks about why, which is more important to me than the how. See that menu right there? Isn't that pretty? So you can make these all very, very clean to use by using this Creator Kit as well as the Center of Excellence Toolkit. Matt, is there anything else you want to add here? I talked about the variables in the last one also. I also like to add a little pop of color as I do this as well. So as I'm looking at these tabs, I try to put a little color in each of these little items here so it brings your eye to where you want the user to be. This is also called a component right here. And you can find components on the Microsoft Gallery, or you can go to pcf.gallery, excuse me. Or you can also go over to the Microsoft forums and you'll see a component library there. These component libraries allow you to take a whole bunch of shortcuts where you build it one time and you use it over and over and over again. Matt, anything else you want to add there? Or is it that
was that? Yeah, that last piece, the component library. You get the perfect header, the perfect footer, whatever. You want to share it with other people. They can just, boom, click on it. You can make it dynamic to where they type in the text they want. It puts it on there. So the components are a really cool feature to just save time.
And I hope we have looking at questions here in the chat window, one of which I did star. It's this gentleman right here. It's Nikunj. His question is around managed and unmanaged solution. We should have had this as one of our top 10 questions. What's the difference between managed and unmanaged? Well, managed, what this basically means is he's talking about a solution here. And if I go a step back here, let me go back out of this. There we go. Perfect. Solutions you'll find at make.powerapps.com down here in the bottom right. These solutions allow you to build portable entities where you can port something from dev to QA to prod very seamlessly. They also turn on more features than what you have available to you without solutions. Things like environment variables and things to help you migrate this and do application lifecycle management. What our friend here in the chat window is asking, with cute kids there, is that, I think it's kids. Oh, can't quite tell. I'm sorry about that. So what he's asking about specifically is about a managed versus unmanaged. Managed code basically means that as I migrate this to production, anybody in production cannot change my code with the exception of a few things that the developer may be letting you do. If you delete managed code, it deletes all the artifacts that were part of that solution as long as they have no dependencies in any other solution. If I port an unmanaged solution over and I delete the solution, it leaves the artifacts behind. So if this right here was an unmanaged solution, I would want to make sure that I delete the artifacts first by selecting the little 3 dot, going to remove and removing it from the environment first. This, unfortunately, is not going to let me do this because I'm actually looking at other stuff here. But if I were to remove this from the environment, oh, actually, this one in particular, notice it's not letting me do it because it depends on something else as well. The account table is used by Microsoft. The one right below it, though, I should be able to remove it from the environment. By removing this from the environment, it's going to delete it from the solution and the environment I'm in. So before you delete an unmanaged solution, typically you want to delete the artifacts in that solution that you can delete. Otherwise, it will leave that stuff behind there for you. Okay, so hopefully that answered your question. I think that's our last question, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was a great tip from you, Brian.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, this is all part of our training that we do. We do training like this all the time at Pragmatic Works. We do things like hackathons. We teach you how to build with your own example. We also have on-demand learning, and we do virtual mentoring where we help you one-on-one as well. You'll see the link in our chat, in the little streaming by right there. You can subscribe for free to our on-demand platform and watch things like App in a Day and a number of under-day classes also. It's about 80 classes. I think about 9 or so are free forever. That's part of that. Alexa, do you want to wrap us up, madam?
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has any suggestions for the next topic we should do, feel free to comment. Let us know how we did. And if you guys have any questions for next time, thank you everyone for watching, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks.